Hello, Alex here, and in this video I want to talk about my results and tests trying to get a usable-ish image out of some 48-year expired Kodak Tri-X 400. Let's get into it. In my video about my huge darkroom haul at the end of 2021, I mentioned that I obtained a crapload of tins of bulk rolled film, most of which were unopened. 3 of these were tins of Kodak Tri-X 400, which had expired in 1974, basically 50 years ago. It's completely unknown how this film was stored for most of its life. However, I know from at least 2003-ish onwards, it was stored at about 10 to 15 Celsius in a very dry room. So that's good for that part, but I had no idea how it was stored beforehand. And I wanted to figure out what the best EI to rate it at was, how it was usable, if I could do anything to fight the inevitable base fog, because it's a 400 speed film, 50 years old, it's going to pick up a lot of base fog, and it did, trust me. See what I could do to kind of work around that. This video was not really scripted. I'm just going to go through my strips pretty quickly, and then we can talk about the actual usability of the film once I've shot a full roll of it in another video. The first thing I did to figure out how the film was vaguely usable at all was I shot a 12 exposure roll starting at EI 800 down in 1-stop increments, 400, 200, 100, etc. And I developed it in HC110, which has a known restraining anti-fogging capacity to an extent. Dilution B for 6.5 minutes at 20 Celsius, because that is a fairly standard time for HC110, and it would give me a pretty vague idea of what works and what doesn't. Much to my surprise, there were images at 200, 400, and 800. They're very thin, but they are there. The images that were exposed at lower EIs, so more overexposed, they don't look as good in the negatives, and to be honest, they don't look that much better in the real scans either. The base fog is there, the film has lost a lot of sharpness somehow, compared to fresh Tri-X anyway, and it's very, very grainy. But it gave me hope. If I could get any kind of a vaguely non-zero image at 800 in 50-year expired film, then there's hope that I can get, probably triple digits of a usable ISO or EI at the end of all this. My second test roll was shot in a Canon A1 I borrowed from a friend, but I did accidentally have exposure compensation set, or more specifically, it was set and I didn't check to make sure to turn it off. So I shot these next 3 shots at 100, 50, and 25 respectively. Honestly, these look pretty okay. These were stand developed in HC110, 1+100 for an hour. And that makes sense that this works well because the restrainer has more time to kind of occupy those coordination sites on the silver crystals, if you want to go that way. The restrainer is better able to do the anti-fogging job in a more dilute developer. That's the core result here, and I figured that would be the case, and sure enough it was. Okay, longer development time with a weaker developer seems to work well in terms of fighting that base fog and getting a clearer, sharp enough image. So next thing I tried was HC110 dilution F for 15 minutes at 20 Celsius with normal agitation every minute. This did not go well. This actually went worse than the original test. I don't know why. The film, at least with HC110, does not seem to like agitation that much. Maybe it's just incredibly underdeveloped, but it also just doesn't look as good. I can't really quantify or describe it. The grain texture just looks bad. So I scrapped that idea. I needed to figure out something that would give me a long time without the agitation which was causing all of these problems. So the first thing I tried was another restrainer added in on top of it. So I did the only logical thing. I imported a bunch of benzotriazole from a guy in the Ukraine on eBay. His name is Reagent 007. So I got about 100 grams of benzotriazole in the post one day, which for the record, at the kind of normal concentrations that people use it as an additive, it's about enough for, I think I worked it out, like 19 to 23,000 rolls of film, so a bit more than I need. So I did another test roll, shooting at, 1-stop increments, this time in the Canon 1V, no exposure compensation, thankfully, and I developed it in HD 110, stand developed again for 1 hour with 3 drops of a 1 weight % solution of benzotriazole added into the HC 110. Being a restrainer, it's going to reduce the speed of your development of both the fog and your actual image. And it most certainly did, with the only vaguely consistently usable EI being about 3 to 6. Not quite what I wanted. I would be okay with it cutting a couple of stops off the effective film speed. Not like half a dozen stops, that's a bit too much. If I'm going to be using this film, I want to be able to use it handheld even if I get crappy results, just because I have it. I don't want it to be absolutely technically perfect and get the maximum I can out of it. I want to be able to walk around and have fun with it, you know? So the benzotriazole in this case didn't work, but I have enough to do a few thousand rolls worth of tests with other films in the future if needs be. So, knowing that a more concentrated developer could outcompete with the restrainer and push development a little bit further, at least for the actual latent image and not just the fog, I thought I would try HC110 dilution F again, but with stand development with 2 drops of the 1% benzotriazole solution. That actually kind of worked. These negatives don't look too bad. I didn't write down what ISO they were, or EI, which makes this pretty useless as a test. However, I need a little bit of agitation to counteract the bromide drag, but not too much, or the film looks like crap. So I have to find some kind of a balance here. So I tried 2 semi-stand rolls, HC110, 1+100, 20 degrees Celsius, that kind of, standard process. I tried one roll with one inversion at 30 minutes, bromide drag. I tried one with an inversion at 15 and then 30 minutes, bromide drag. But it didn't affect the overall quality of the negatives too much with that little bit of extra agitation, which is good. So it's just the continuous regular agitation that seems to be a severe problem, not, intermittent agitation over a long period. So in a last-ditch attempt, I got talking to some of my more experimentalist friends, shall we say, from various different Discord servers and Instagram. And Golf, what is a shutter on Instagram? He's kind of my go-to guy for any mad stuff like this. He definitely deserves the name experimentalist, and he recommended and gave me advice on what he calls his exponential agitation method. You don't agitate every minute. It is a kind of a semi-stand thing. You could use it for shorter development times as well, but it works well for semi-stand. HC110, 1+100, 60 minutes development time. 30 seconds continuous inversion, not swizzle stick agitation. It has to be inversion at the start. 30 seconds resting. One inversion at 1 minute, one inversion at 2 minutes, and then another at 4, 8, 16, and 32 minutes each. So you're agitating more at the start when there is more development happening because the developer is more concentrated, which means there is more bromide being produced earlier in the development. So that's when the risk of bromide drag is higher. And that worked out really, really well. I shot this at 400, 200, 100, 800. I put 800 fourth so I wouldn't forget whether 400 or 800 were first. 50, 25, 12, etc. There is a little bit of a crunchiness to it compared to the true stand images. It isn't quite as clear in parts, but it works. There's something here. And I've done this twice now. No bromide drag, and I'm not using the Jobo for this. I'm just putting the tank on the table. So if there's going to be any temperature fluctuation, this is with that happening, and it's still coming out okay. But if you look at the scans, 800 is dead. 400 is also pretty dead as well. It's not great. I was metering more towards the shadows here. There's still not a lot there. 400 to 200 is a huge bump in quality. 200 to 100 less so, but definitely a noticeable bump again. 100 to 50 and 25, the difference in the quality is very, very small by comparison, in my opinion. So it has been a hot minute since I did all of this testing and recorded most of this video, but here we are. I've shot 2 24 exposure rolls and a 12 exposure roll of this stuff since, and the development has been consistent and reproducible, which is the most important thing. I don't care if it doesn't look as good as new film. It's not going to. It's half a century old. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. But knowing how it's going to look and being able to shoot in accordance with those expectations, that's more than good enough for me. Triple digits, being able to shoot at EI 100, yeah, 2 stops below box, huge win in my book. It's more than just usable. It's almost reaching up towards okay territory. Yeah. There is a lot of room to optimize the development and the shooting a lot further, but I don't really care. It's good enough, and you know, maybe yes, I can get an extra stop of dynamic range, or maybe get it usable at EI 200 with a bit more work. But that might require half of my remaining stash, at which point I'd only have a few rolls to actually shoot. And that's kind of the point of photography, isn't it? Taking pictures. So I'd rather use what I have to take pictures of a known low-mo, pretty crappy quality at EI 100 than try and get something significantly better, but maybe only get 1 or 2 rolls. That's where my priorities lie, essentially. I enjoyed screwing around with this stuff and getting through that process of figuring out what this type of film, or this particular batch of film, does and does not like, but I still want to shoot it at the end of the day. This process will prove very useful in the future because I do have some other bulk tins to get through of much higher and much lower native ISOs, which is going to be interesting. Obviously, a huge shout out has to go to Golf, or What Is a Shutter, for his help and patience in dealing with all of this. I originally scripted that I was going to say I had 2 rolls of this Tri-X left in a box that I've had set aside for whenever I eventually met him, but I have met him in the time that it took me to record and publish this video, so he's got his film. He's got Lucky Super 100, Fuji Industrial 100, a couple of rolls of Spicy Tri-X, a couple of sheets of Kodak HIE, which I'll be talking more about in the future. But I think that pretty much wraps it up for this particular video. I'm not going to do a my first roll for this stuff. It's still Tri-X. I'll talk about my actual first roll of Tri-X whenever I do that kind of thing. What I might do at some stage is take a roll of this and a roll of fresh Tri-X and compare it to... Allegedly, this is 1954 Tri-X from release. I might compare all 3 of them in the same development process with the same agitation. I think that might be fun. Why not? So yeah, Golf, thank you so much for all your help and patience. For the rest of you, stay safe and bye bye for now. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at Shaka1277 for new pictures every day. If you like this video and enjoy what I do on the channel, please consider subscribing or checking out my Patreon, where the tiers start at just €1 per month.